on the posts hast thou set up thy remembrance, for thou hast discovered thyself to another than me, and art gone up. Thou hast enlarged thy bed and made thee a covenant with them. Thou lovest their bed where thou sawest it, and thou wentest. Hello, good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. We're picking up today in Genesis 38 with the birth of Judah's sons by his daughter-in-law. And we read about that story. We don't need to go through the sort of details of that again, I don't think. But here they are born. And it came to pass in the time of her travail. Actually, I'm going to read through this into the next chapter, because that's what we're covering today also. We won't spend much time on this. And it came to pass in the time of her travail that, behold, twins were in her womb. And it came to pass when she travailed that the one put out his hand, and the midwife took and bound upon his hand a scarlet thread, saying, This came out first. And it came to pass, as he drew back his hand, that behold, his brother came out. And she said, How hast thou broken forth? This breach be upon thee. Therefore his name was called Pharez. And afterwards came out his brother that had the scarlet thread upon his hand, and his name was called Zerah. All right. Let's just make the commentary here on this before we read through. I can't decide, apparently. But I just wanted to... Obviously, once again, Pharez, the name means like a breach or break forth, something like that. And we don't need to look it up, because that's it's very common formula in Genesis here. We see at their birth there's something notable, just like with Jacob. And this is very similar. You notice there's a sort of a younger and older, but younger older is not exactly the same with twins. With twins, they're really the same age, but you do, one is born first and another was born second. And when you have succession, when it comes to things like that, it becomes important. Judah, the father of Pharez and Zerah, is the line of the kings. And so Pharez and Zerah, it's important because the succession, the kingdom was through Pharez. Now, there's something, there is, I believe that in the genealogy of Luke, Christ is descended through the Zerah line. And that's because what Luke is not, as far as I recall, the seed royal. It is his descent, as I learned it, by Mary. Whereas the one in Matthew is more of a royal genealogy, tracing him back to David. Anyways. But David was Pharez, I believe. Pharez, Ezra, I can hear it in my mind. So, yeah, Pharez is in the line of Christ. And so that's there is also stuff that has been extraneously written about the twins, and also about the line of Judah continuing in other places. And you can read about that and a lot of the materials, but a lot of that is, I consider highly speculative and based, and no harm in some speculation as long as you don't make it a point of faith or something like an article of faith. A lot of times it's not an article of faith, but you treat it like one. Anyways, so we'll have no more to say about that, because their birth is not a particular time to really unpack all that comes of them, except to say that this is Judah. His succession is not through any of the sons that he had through the Canaanite. And we don't know what happened to the third one, whom he did not give. But as I recall, and we'll at some point we'll come across it. I'll have to note it again, and we could go look at numbers and see who's there, because they give the families of the tribes there and their chief heads, I guess. So let's read chapter 39 now. And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites, bought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. Let me see something. Okay. Oh, there we go. Boy, some button got hit, and now it's coming through loud and clear. There we go. That's what I'm more used to. And the Lord was with Joseph. That's quite loud now. That's good. The Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him, and he made him overseer of his house, and all that he had he put into his hand. And it came to pass, from the time that he had made him overseer in his house, and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house, and in the field. And he left all that he had in Joseph's hand. And he knew not aught he had, save the bread which he did eat. And Joseph was a goodly person, and well favored. And it came to pass after these things, that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph. And she said, Lie with me. But he refused, getting all King Jamesy. But he refused, and said unto his master's wife, Behold, my master wotteth not what is with me in the house, and he hath committed all that he hath into my hand. There is none greater in this house than I, neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee, because thou art his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? And it came to pass, as she spake to Joseph day by day, that he hearkened not unto her, to lie by her, or to be with her. And it came to pass about this time, that Joseph went into the house to do his business. And there was none of the men of the house there within. And she caught him by his garment, saying, Lie with me. Sorry, I lost the thing there. And he left his garment in her hand, and fled, and got him out. And it came to pass, when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand, and was fled forth, that she called unto the men of her house, and spake unto them, saying, See, he hath brought in an Hebrew unto us to mock us. He came in unto me to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice. And it came to pass, when he heard that... And it came to pass, when he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me, and fled, and got him out. And she laid up his garment by her, until his Lord came home. And she spake unto him according to these words, saying, The Hebrew servant which thou hast brought unto us came in unto me to mock me. Or disgrace would be better. And it came to pass, as I lifted up my voice and cried... And it came to pass, as I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled out. And it came to pass, when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spake unto him, saying, After this manner did thy servant to me, that his wrath was kindled. And Joseph's master took him, and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in the prison. But the Lord was with Joseph, and showed him mercy, and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison. And whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it. The keeper of the prison looked not unto anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him, and that which he did, the Lord made it to prosper. Okay. So poor Joseph gets sold to the Egyptians. And as I've talked about many times, slavery in the ancient world was a variated thing. There was a lot of different ways people became enslaved and a lot of reasons they were enslaved. It was only, in the later periods of history, like in North America or in Europe, where Christians started to look and say we shouldn't enslave other Christians, right? At the very least. And I mean, and then again, this is their feelings. I mean, remember, all the anti-slavery feelings are generated from Christianity. There's not some other... Slavery is pretty much accepted everywhere in the world, and we still get crap for it, like we invented it. But, God never abolished it either. And I know Christians wanted to, but the truth is, there is service. Now, obviously, the kind of slavery that was common in the world in the 19th century was pretty horrific. A lot, not quite as horrific as, say, the way Romans treated their prisoners of war. But, I mean, as far as once you came to the States, the transatlantic slave trade, awful, but not much worse than being a galley slave. In fact, maybe better if you make it. Because at least when you got across the Atlantic, if you survived that horrible journey, on the other side, there was a kind of slavery that was a bit more tolerable. Tolerable enough that, there was never a wholesale slave revolt, because while they were badly treated and never, a lot of the whippings and all that, you got to figure that a lot of people are not just whipping willy-nilly of the slaves. It's like the slaves are doing their thing, knowing that there is severe consequence. Anyways, but that kind of racial slavery was kind of new and due also to people trying to find some righteousness in this. And unfortunately, it led people to dehumanize the people they enslaved. And that's why there's this lingering sensitivity around, I think, because it's like there's always a potential from having been enslaved for people coming out of it to look back with some shame on that, and also the other people who engage in it to look back with shame, though it seems pointless to look back with shame since it is not our sin. And there's no, and it's all like that stuff about the parents have eaten the sour grape and the children's teeth are set on edge. People always, like, the past has to rule the present. And the things done in the past by people not entirely, but mostly disconnected from you. I mean, I'm mostly disconnected from my ancestors. I mean, my grandparents, all of them are dead. They're all passed on, as we say euphemistically. It's funny I said that because I threw in a euphemism, but they're dead. Jesus talked about Lazarus sleeping, but he had to make it plain what he meant. No, he's dead. It just meant a euphemism, saying it's sleep. It's because he looks asleep, kind of. That's when they've done the best job, right? When they look asleep. Anyways, but Joseph is brought into the house of a rich man, and he immediately is put in like a administrative position. Because as I talked about, Jacob being a man of the tents implies some sort of education. Joseph also being with the coat of many colors and being the one who runs to and fro on his father's business, that's a lot like lower level management, being brought in at that level. If you've ever, you can be brought in at the bottom in a business, let's say working with the guys building things, the carpenters, and people and then they work up, eventually becoming management, or sometimes they hire people out of college as junior management who have never done the under job, the job underneath, and that often causes some friction and stuff, as we saw with Joseph, right, and his brothers. similar kind of situation, much more sensitive because of them all being brothers. And also very sensitively, probably being somewhat aware of the fact that their father prefers Joseph, always had preferred Joseph's mother, who's now their sainted mother, stepmother and all that, because she's passed away. So it's like, how can you compete with that? And so they'd grown to hate him and they sold him, right? But when they sold him into slavery, it's not, again, they usually reserved, they would, even in America, different slaves were valuable for their skills. If there was a slave who was skilled at something like a tanner or something like that, he would be, his work was not his own, but he was treated with more value between owners, at the least. Joseph has value, and here's the thing: if you're on a slave market, you want to maximize your value because you want that cushy job in the master's house. And Joseph, being an exceptionally intelligent young man, and again, I always think it's funny, and I love pointing this out, how that the most stereotypically Jewish people in the Bible are the characters we meet in Genesis. As far as like in the things that people I don't understand accuse them of, being at the top of the banking, being at the top of any. If you look at what happened in Daniel, the Hebrew children, they came and they looked. The Persians looked and they looked for the most excellent and well-educated young men of the king's household or of the seed royal, and they took them and made them eunuchs and then brought them in as advisors and counselors because they're educated men. And so when he would tell them obviously what he can do. And so he was bought of the captain of the guard, an officer of Pharaoh. The Lord was definitely with him in landing him this spot. It's never good to be sold into slavery, but like I said, not all slavery conditions are created equal. Being involuntarily somewhere, when you're in school involuntarily, you know what I mean? Against your will. It's not so bad. I mean, I never liked school much, but it's not that bad. You know what I mean? It's not like people, no one's protesting, and the cruel treatment of our children, making them work for no money. You know what I mean? Making them, that's what school is. You work for nothing. A lot of make work. I mean, you're working for your education. I understand the value of education. But that should be the point. Sometimes they just there's just a system that just grind the children through, and it doesn't work out so well for everybody. But anyways, he lands in this position with the captain of the guard, who buys him, and the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man. He prospered. Everything he did prospered. That's why I say, the Jews are overrepresented in certain places because they're blessed of God. They're prosperous. The gifts and calling of God are without repentance. Now, sometimes people use those blessings that God gave Abraham and his children, and they use them for evil. That's why people note that they'll say some of this is nefarious. Yeah, but not every example you can take of. Look, once again, Joseph, he's not a Jew yet. Obviously, Judah is the father of the Jews, but he's a Hebrew. He's certainly part of the family. And we talked about Jacob and his nature. It's not to say they're all like that. The different brothers inside, they're not all the same. Jacob and Esau were brothers. They were very different. Same stock. So, don't put too much into that. But there are gifts given to different people. We all have gifts differing. They're different. And I don't think that it's necessarily one is better than the other, but they are good for certain things. And the Lord has made them prosperous. That's why you see them prosper in the world. And if they misuse it, they're going to answer for it. They're going to answer for their misuse of the blessings of God. He's going to call them to account over it. And also all men will be held to account. But They ought to know because God gave them the commandments. God gave them righteous commandments and a understanding of right and wrong. And when men violate that and use the gifts and calling, the gifts of God, not the calling, I mean, you could use using the calling is another issue, but use the gifts of God for evil. Well, they will bear their sins. So it's like, like I said, people say, well, the Jews are always, they're at the head of the gemstones and the banking and all this money stuff, and also doctors and scientists. It's because, you know what I mean? Yes, those people are also well paid, but they're also well trained. They're also very competent. They're also, there's something that they have in blessing that allows them to do those jobs, because not everyone can do them. Not everyone can be a doctor. Not everyone can be a scientist or a lawyer or a researcher. But it's like, if we notice a lot of them do it, it's because they're blessed. Doesn't necessarily mean superiority of race. It's superiority of grace. Grace it's superior to be under God's grace, to have grace in the sight of God, to have grace in the sight of your owner if you're a slave. He was prosperous, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. His master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. A lot like Jacob with Laban, except Potiphar is a much more benevolent figure. He is not he owns Joseph, truthfully. Yeah, right. So, it's like, he doesn't have to, do machinations to keep him there or anything like that. So we don't really, it's not really, in his culture. We can't judge people. Like I said, he is good to his slaves. The fact that people are being bought and sold in the world is too big of a problem for any one person in history to solve. It took a massive movement to end slavery. And it took an empire, the British Empire, to bring it to a quote-unquote end. It's not entirely ended. There's all kinds of people in one degree of involuntary servitude or another in this world. And we think not about, because we're free, we don't think about it. But people are serving even now. As in America, they're all like, hey, we're not, it's like, as other places, people are genuinely enslaved and being murdered. We're talking about slavery that happened hundreds of years ago in this country. We've got genuine slavery going on right now in the continent of Africa and elsewhere. And I thought it was about, I think the rights of all men are important, but some people said the rights of, we have to pay special attention to the rights of brown people. Except for when, it's not convenient, apparently. So he's prosperous. He's, his master could be envious of that prosperity. Sometimes people are. They see you doing well and they don't like it. But he rather takes the delight of I've got a competent servant, right? So he finds, by doing such a good job. That's why, in the New Testament it says, whatever you do, I think this is in the New Testament. Well, the Bible says, whatever you do, do it with your might. And it says in the New Testament, what you do for your employer, do as unto the Lord. Not as men pleasers, not with eye service, but with your whole heart. You want to do your best at whatever you're doing. Because, and it's a model. It's like, here's the thing. Yes, I've received grace for salvation. But there's more grace to be had. There's even greater ways that God could bless me. Everyone knows this, right? We have grace sufficient for salvation. But, like with Paul, he said, my grace is sufficient to you, meaning the grace he'd been given. But he was not given the thorn in his side to be removed. His thorn in the flesh. The messenger of Satan, as he called it. Whatever that is. Doesn't matter. It means that sometimes we get so limited to grace, and then the rest is go with faith. You're not going to get off on that. You're gonna suffer that perhaps. We won't suffer damnation, but we may suffer in the flesh, as our Lord did. though in demonstration of the fact that nothing could truly harm him. So as Joseph found grace in his master's sight to be elevated to higher position, because he's in the master's house. He belongs to the master Potiphar. Now, he could be digging in the garden or working in the kitchen, emptying buckets or something, or carrying water maybe, doing physical labor. There's always need of that throughout history. I had a well flood. I had this electrical pump, pumping out the water. It was like 8 by 8 by 8 about. So 64 cubic feet of water. And it emptied in less. It took less than 2 hours to empty up the, like the little area you see me sitting in here, maybe the end of the bookshelf, about that big. Like an 8 by 8 cell, filled up with water, and it emptied it out. You know how long it would take people with buckets to do that? We have these like electrical. I call them my electrical slaves, because the amount of work being done in a great house, like it, even around here, it's like, man, I got a lot to do. Even with my kids and them doing chores, there's a lot of work to be done. And those who could afford it, and those to this day who can afford it, will buy. Sometimes they hire servants. They're hired servants. Now they're free to come and go as they please and quit. But obviously, you can't come and go as you please if you want to keep your job. That's always true, right? While you're kind of belong to them while you're at your job. While you're punched in, your time belongs to them, unless you want to quit. Which you can, but you have to quit. You can't just come and go, usually most jobs, just as you want. Like, I'll be back maybe later. That's a good way to lose your job. So there is an element of, we have to voluntarily submit ourselves to this situation of employment, which is superior, of course, to being actually compelled. I'm just saying there's a lot more, many more sides of slavery. It's not just this one-sided question. People are like, slavery's bad. It's like, yeah, divorce is bad too, but we still got that. I'm not making an argument in favor of slavery by any means. But, we have all kinds of service short of that, and I think that's the best. It's like there was some service necessary. Everyone has to serve in some capacity. Meaning just to even earn enough money to support yourself. Well, everyone should, right? We got to serve somewhat to produce, to be worth and worthy of the things we obtain. Now, salvation is given us by grace, by an unmerited favor, right? And I wonder what this word grace here is, if it's different. It's not charis from the New Testament, which is the word for grace in the New Testament. And I wonder if it's the standard word, which I don't know the standard word in the Old Testament, but I might recognize it when I see it. I got Bible Hub all ready to go here on my phone. By the way, at the end, this is being recorded Monday the 25th of April. And this Thursday, I have a estimated delivery of my satellite, and so we'll be going back to live, which I'm looking forward to because pre-recording them is not so good for me. There's something when you do a live stream that's a little more, I don't know. But let's see. Okay, that's chapter 38. Oh, come on. Can I go back? I don't like their app very much, to tell you the truth. I can't wait to use my computer again. It'll be very nice. So, Grayson is... Oh, wrong. Oh, no, go back. That's so small. Oh, joy. Okay. Great. Now I'm like stuck here. Thanks. I'm going to try this again. All right. I'm stuck. All right, hold on here. This is just giving me trouble after trouble. All right, there we go. Now, hopefully I can click on Grace. I did it again. Hold on. This is horrible. Grace. Okay. Chen. From Chanan. I say it's Chanan or, but I know it's pronounced with a. Yeah, so this is favor or acceptance. It's not quite as strong as charis. And it's also used of elegance when speaking of a woman, her as being graceful in her appearance, of form and appearance, that kind of grace. Also of lips, of speech, like having lips of grace. So it is not that type of grace. But it is another thing, favor, acceptance. Now, grace as unmerited favor is a New Testament concept. And there is an Old Testament word that means the same thing, mercy. Because mercy is very close. Because mercy implies you're guilty and you need mercy. And usually we think of grace in that terms because it is God's coming to us not just with mercy, but with favor. Because mercy could be begrudged. You get a begrudged mercy. It's kind of got a neutral thing. It just has the implication of showing mercy to one who is worthy of punishment. But this has the idea of favor, pleasant, precious, and such things. So, again, we do, and that's what I'm saying, like, we have God's unmerited favor, but there is further grace we could receive. Like I talk about with healings or with greater gifts. Right? We want to know more. We want to become, if we want to ascend in his service. I mean, become servants that he looks to do his will, to perform his works, to be used of God. If we want to be used of God, we have to be, it's not, you don't just stumble into that. No, there's even Paul, like he was prepared. It wasn't just like an accident. Though I know that sometimes God does do accidents, doesn't he, right? But, I would say this. It looks like an accident, but with God, it's no accident, right? When I talk about accidents, things that look accidental, it's not like you always see the freight train coming, right? He made him overseer of all his house, and all he put in his hand, all that he had from the time he made him overseer in his house, everything in his house went better. It all was blessed. The blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in his house and in the field. It just, everything seemed to go right. That's what the blessing of the Lord is. It's things work right. All things work together for good for those that love God, for those that are called according to his purpose. In the house and in the field. It's a metaphor for, everything. And he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not aught he had save the bread which he did. He didn't even know what he had except the food on his table. He didn't really have any. That's how unaware. And this kind of language is really transmitting to me the pleasure that this gave Potiphar. He's the captain of. He's got big things on his mind at his job, but he's also very well paid and wealthy because of his job. And so his house. But his house and stuff. It's like it's hard to be the captain. He's kind of like the slave of Pharaoh. And so he needs a slave who's going to look after his stuff the way he kind of looks after Pharaoh's military, I should say his guards, right? His personal guard. He's the overseer of that. He needs someone to manage that, someone he can trust. And so this guy, and that makes sense because Potiphar, as a man in a position of trust, he looks to Joseph, he judges him, he puts him in a position, everything prospers, so he trusts him. He puts his trust in Joseph. And he favors him and puts him in charge of everything. And he is not disappointed. And Joseph was a goodly person and well favored. That means he was a nice looking guy, goodly person. I don't need to look it up. I know it means it doesn't mean morally good. So I got it right here, and I don't have to put my password in again. So goodly was what? Goodly was toar. It means outline or form. It means well formed. And then in well favored, I think is more on the side of fair or beautiful. Yeah, attractive. So goodly meant he was well formed. Some people aren't well formed. That's one of the he wasn't just sitting around reading books all the time. It's to be well formed sometimes. Well, some people are blessed with just naturally good formed bodies. But I think everyone benefits from athletic exercise, even if you're not stereotypically, in your sex, you're not what by nature maybe what they say people are looking for of the opposite. Men aren't looking for that. Women aren't looking for that. Men, maybe you're short. Women, maybe you're whatever. Or we're overweight and all that stuff. And I remember I had a friend who had trouble with, he was a lifelong bachelor, but he didn't know how, he was very shy and didn't know how to talk to women and stuff. And he felt bad about his body and his, because he was unhealthy and stuff. And I told him, well, I'll tell you what, it's hard to get rid of your anxiety and your social awkwardness, but you can control the part about your body. That's willpower. You can fix that. Some things are really hard to fix. Like to say, if it can't fix stupid, that's why you shouldn't make fun of it when you encounter it. You got to be with patience instruct those that oppose themselves. It's not easy, all right? But it's incumbent on those who, if you think you're smart, don't pick on people that aren't. And don't mock them for not being as smart as you, because you may not be as smart as you think. He was a goodly person, well favored. But you can fix, unless you have a true genetic or glandular issue, which does exist on some level. Well, for some people, it's very hard. Some people find it easier to lose weight than others, And part of it is our diet and stuff. There's bad things in our food. You got to eliminate all the, cut out a lot of bad stuff. But still, I told my friend that he went out and exercised, and he looks great. And, and the thing is, when you feel good about the way your body and stuff, and you're not thinking about it, as far as blaming your appearance for your problems or something like that. Well, that's good. It gives that can help boost confidence, which people are going to find more attractive anyways. I mean attractive outside of the realm of sex and the wife here and all that. I mean, just the Potiphar finds this young man attractive. He puts him in, attractive in the sense of I want to put this guy in charge of my stuff. He's competent and handsome, and all these things. Well, and he trusts Joseph because as Pharaoh trusts him, he feels like when he finds a good servant, he can trust that servant. Joseph has never given him a reason not to. He does everything so well. Everything's good. You don't look a gift horse in the mouth, as they say. When something lands in your lap that good, the tendency is to just be like, wow. Now, but there is, you gotta watch out for people, though, who present and who seem to be all nothing but good. Because, Satan himself is disguised as an angel of light, therefore it is no great thing if his ministers also be disguised as the ministers of righteousness. People come feigning to be servants of God, feigning, that they are representing God. But the Lord has not sent them. So anyways, it came to pass after these things. So this is now well established. He is head of the house, chief servant for the guard. Not too bad. His brothers, in sparing his life, they made him, they put him here. I'm sure he's not happy about being sold, but he's making the most of his life, doing a good job. It's got to hurt that his brothers, but he can't go back. Or, obviously he serves Potiphar, and Potiphar won't want him to go. I need you. And you're not here on your own. I bought you. So his master's wife casts her eyes on him. Now she sees him. And suddenly she sees him in a way that she shouldn't be looking at him. But she does. And she says, lie with me. She wants to have sex with him. He refuses and says, look, my master does not know what is with me in the house, and he has committed all that he has into my hand. He doesn't even know what I'm doing here. He doesn't know what I have in his house. He doesn't know what I'm in his house, and he doesn't even know what's in my hands. That's a position of great trust. There is none greater in this house than I. He's over everything and everyone in that house. Every other servant. Every other person that's part of Potiphar's household is under Joseph. And he has not kept back anything from me except for you. You're not under me. Because you're his wife. She's the mistress of the house. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? And notice he knows. The 10 commandments have not been given. He knows that would be wicked. Now, whether he received that instruction, again, we saw that Jacob referred to the laws and statutes of God. There was an understanding. Again, we already have, as it says in the New Testament, a law unto ourselves. When our consciences bear witness to what we think is right and wrong. We quickly discover some sense of right and wrong. And often it is twisted. We do twist, because when they knew God, they honored him not as God, but changed the likeness of the invisible God, the likeness of the incorruptible God, to a image made like unto corruptible man. So when we think of, men's righteousness becomes twisted. So our conscience is not a perfect guide. It could be, because that image of God that we see, if we would submit to it, but instead we reject it, say no, we don't honor God, but we rather do as we please. And at some point, we've all made that decision when we lie or whatever we do, because we know it's wrong. And Joseph knows this is wrong. And she, of course, knows it's wrong. But sometimes people don't care. It brings to mind the great whore of Revelation, right? Riding upon the beast, drunken with the wine of her fornication. Now, she's a fornicator, of course, because, as Jesus taught, fornication is someone who has, well, not as Jesus, as the Bible, it's just a fact of nature. Fornication means sex outside of marriage. It's not adultery. Though there is an element of adultery in it, because the reason she's the great whore is she was espoused. She's played the whore. And we talked about that a bit when we were going with Tamar. Well, we didn't talk about it in terms of the book of Revelation. It would have been a good example. Because, one of the themes of the New Testament is that Paul talks about the church and the believers in Jesus as of the bride of Christ. He says, I have espoused you to one husband, that I may present you a chaste virgin to Christ. The great whore in Revelation drinks a cup from a cup that is filled with the wine of the wrath of her fornication. Because her sin is fornication, because she is the great apostasy. She represents everyone who will turn away from Christ to go whoring after Satan in whatever capacity that is. Like when I think about what I saw the past couple of years, I see how people just go along. People that don't even agree with it just go along with it anyways. People I like, even respect mostly. I mean, I having seen, people, some more, some less. It's, hey, it's a marginal loss of respect. Hey, we can't all be the most respected in the world. I couldn't, I could not resist it to the degree I think I would like to have seen myself resist it. I could have been a little faster, I guess. I in hindsight, I only wish that I'd been quicker on the draw. I was pretty quick as it was, but I wish I was quicker. Noticing, coming to conclusions. I try not to jump to conclusions. But sometimes we need to think fast, act fast. And so, we have to accept that we can't always take all the time in the world to figure out things. We have to, it's like it's because at some point our life might be on the line, and our faith might be on the line with it, and those two things might be in opposition to each other, and so that you can't preserve your faith without losing your life, and you can't preserve your life without losing your faith. And and that's the thing, is like we didn't even have anything that stark, but people were already abandoning. They were doing things contrary to what they believed. They were abandoning their faith to go back to their normal life. They knew things they thought were true, but they acted out in the world as if they weren't true. And so I said to someone in the comments, I said, I'm never going to call myself a conservative again. I'm going to call myself what they call me in church. I'm a wild man. No one, that's fine. I'm a wild man. No, I'm not one of you conservatives. I'm a wild man. Untamed. From the margins, from the borderlands, from the outside. It's insane that a father of 8 would be an outside thing. It's like, because that's not where society is. Society despises, or they say they do. Not real society. I don't know the society around me that I'm particularly despised, but the one out there that's trying to take over the world, it despises me. Anyway, so we have to be able to win the it's on the line. Because this is temptation. Lie with me, it's like, deny the truth. Do something against your conscience. It's nice that he had such a strong conscience to know, to know this, to say, this would be a sin against God. How could I do such great wickedness? That's how it sounds weird, but I felt that way after a while about, how can I go around masquerading as if I believe something when I don't? How can I tell all but, how can I parade around the store in a mask when I don't believe it's true? When I believe it doesn't do any good. And it's just pretext for greater and greater control over people's lives. And you still, if I left the country, I couldn't get back in. And you think about that. Not without taking the treatment from the mad scientists who've come up with this bioweapon, and then it's I think the vaccine is an anti-missile missile. It's a bioweapon used to stop another bioweapon. But at some point, I feel like I don't want my body to be a battleground. But, our righteousness, our integrity is going to be tempted. It was tempted the past couple of years. We could see how we reacted, I see where I could improve. I mean, a lot of people, they got a lot. I hope they do some soul searching. A lot of people, I think they just went back to what they think of as normal. And while their lives may be mostly the way they've always been, in the circles of power, they feel like they've gotten somewhere. Oh, believe me, they do. They think they've gotten somewhere. We shall see. We shall see. So, in the midst of all this prosperity, the house is prospering. She's got to just totally ruin it. So let's see. He recognized it as a sin against God. And it came to pass that she spoke to him day by day that he hearkened not unto her, to lie by her, or to be with her. And it came to pass about this time that Joseph went into the house to do his business, and there was none of the men of that house there within. And she caught him by his garment, saying, Lie with me. And he gave his garment into her hand and fled and got him out. So now he finds himself in private with her. This is something you should avoid. Don't be caught in private, with a woman who is of a known bad character. Joseph may be blessed in many things, but sometimes he lacks discretion, it appears to me. Or to have that, just like with his brothers. He couldn't see that coming. You know what I mean? He's a bit naive. I'll say that. A bit dead good on the organizational stuff, right? Just absolutely, just wonder kid, right? But, I mean, he's probably in his mid-20s by now. Because some years have passed. I mean, for all this prosperity to happen, it's got to be over time. Right? He was like young when he was sold off. He was a teenager, right? And so now he's alone with her. He's going in there to do his business, but everyone's gone. And that's something that he should have been mindful of. You know what I mean? I mean, honestly, this is a bad situation because until he gets her to alter her behavior, he's playing hard to get, but not, hard enough. And that's the thing is that, like, I don't know. In some ways, like, what could he do in this situation? Like I say, he could be a little more mindful and watch out. But hey, the truth is we can all stumble into situations we're not prepared for. He's not ready for this situation in the sense of, like, truly ready. I mean, he's able to get himself out without sinning, but he still ends up in trouble over it. And that shows you, I don't know. I've never had anyone be so insistent. Even when I was single, I never had like any. I don't know how to deal with that. I don't know what. How do you gently? Because here's the thing: women can be very sensitive. And when that passionate desire can turn to hate on a dime. It's not just women either; it's men. Men often, they want her, but then they get her and then they hate her. Men often have issues with hate and all that and blah, blah, blah. I mean, so do women. Everyone's got issues. I can't speak to all of it, and I don't want to be general to everything. Well, I can be general to everything, for human beings. It's like a man, it's not just, men certainly do this to the ladies. I mean, we just saw the rape of Dina, lie with me. And, and she was forced, I believe, right? I thought it specified that he forced her. And that's what it implies here when he said, he came here to mock me. I think I mentioned at the time, it'd be better to say, disgrace or humiliate, in the sense of like, when a woman was raped, that would be the way it would. He is defiled. He's done something to her. Mock is not really the word we would use today. Disgrace, or I think disgrace is a good one. To disgrace me, to humiliate me. Humiliate me in a sense, in a social sense. You know what I mean? Or whatever. Well, in a sense of like, a lot of times, that's the thing is like, one, it's a disgraceful thing to do to someone against their will. Certainly. I mean, obviously, in the context of marriage, it's not disgraceful. But it is disgraceful to do that to someone. And the person who has that done to them often feels ashamed and humiliated. Like, like it happened to them. Somehow they feel like Joseph, even in his situation here, he's going to get in trouble for this, and he's going to feel very like, what could I have done differently? Well, you might, one might question, like, could I mean, because I already did. What, you didn't see us coming? I mean, some girl keeps hitting on you and telling you she's got the hots for you so explicitly. It's not just like some flirting. Oh, does she like me or not? It's not like that at all. This is explicit invitation to sexual intercourse. And she becomes so frustrated that in the her wrath of him refusing her, that it appears that this moment, it doesn't, until this moment, on a dime, she's left with his garment, he runs out, and she decides she's going to fix him. So she called unto the men of her house and spake to them, saying, see, he hath brought in Hebrew to mock us. Again, mock mean disgrace us, to bring disgrace upon us, to humiliate our women, so to speak. Again, humiliation. I mean, when someone comes into your house and just starts sleeping with the women of your house, you can see why that would be, especially when it's like the master's wife, not just like maybe one of his daughters or something like that. This is going to be extremely offensive to him. Even yet, though, it's strange he does not have him killed, because for such things, people routinely were killed. Certainly, there'd be no even need of a judicial proceeding for him to have Joseph executed, I assume. What's the point? And now I can only think of two things. One, obviously the Lord gives Joseph favor, and can cause in the mind of Potiphar him to not seek his death. And also, I remember in the movie Joseph, King of Dreams, I think it was called. They did a good job. Well, it was interesting. I don't say they're good. I like the way they kind of sorted it out without having to tell everything, and they made it like Potiphar wasn't sure. Like he had some doubt about Joseph, which of course he does, about whether or not, like initially, of course, the fact of her with his garments and making this accusation is going to make him mad. Even if it seems unbelievable. Because it's unbelievable on every front. It's unbelievable his wife would do this. It's unbelievable his trusted servant would do this. But she's making the accusation. And she is the wife. And he is the slave. So the Hebrew servant, again, she goes after him for being a Hebrew. That's very clear. This Hebrew servant. So anti-Semitism once again. I mean, not exactly, because modern anti-Semitism is very particular, right? There's a particular mentality to it, and I don't really understand it a lot. I mean, I was part of it, sort of to some degree, though my foray into that was extremely specific, because I didn't really believe that like some people like that all Jews are the sons of the devil or something. I definitely didn't believe that. I thought it was like some percentage. They were mixed. The sons of the devil were mixed in among them and giving the Jews a bad name. you know, no, they're giving themselves a bad name mostly. It's just people, it's a combination of their own sin and also the envy of others. Because, when you prosper, people love to see you fall. And when you prosper, people love to pick out your faults also. So while they're blessed, they're also fall under a lot of criticism. And, you look at Joseph, he's blessed, and then he's so blessed that the wife takes a look at him, and pretty soon he's in jail. So, there's such thing as mixed blessings. Not everything is cut and dry. But again, for those who are called according to His purpose, all things work together for good, and that we can trust. And so Joseph she repeats her story twice, basically, that he left his garment. I cried out, her little rape story, her little Me Too accusation. Obviously, again, I'm no apologist for rapists. And I do think that, I don't think it's cool for guys to just insinuate themselves into a girl's pants, for sure. But because I'm against fornication in every case. You should ask a girl to marry her, and then you can kiss her on the altar, and it's okay. You know when it's okay to kiss kiss a girl? When the man of God says you can do it. Until then, you should refrain. That's the simple truth there. You shouldn't even be kissing. Keep your mouth to yourself. Everybody's all anxious to pretend to get married, is what it is. You're pretending to get married and pretending to be committed to each other, but you're not. That's why I hate dating. It just doesn't make any sense. It's like, we're committed to each other, sort of. That's why their marriages end up being the same thing. Why would you change your way of committing to people? You always have a back door open. If you can't take the plunge with both feet, don't even bother. You're not ready. Don't get half committed is what I'm saying. I'm not saying don't bother trying to get committed. Get committed. But to figure out what kind of person you want to commit to, don't. Everyone always they get all like, oh, we got to see. I remember someone saying, well, how will I know if we're compatible? It's like, human beings are malleable. If you found someone who on every other level was like your absolute soulmate, you don't think you can work out sexual differences? I can't think of anything more, I don't know. It's pretty shallow. I mean, obviously, I've heard stories of people who got married and for whom marriage was an unexpected disappointment. Like guys who found out their wives were, as they used to say, frigid or something like that. They were, whatever. I think it's with patience and stuff, things can be worked out, I suppose. I don't know. There's all kinds of situations out there, but fornication is not right. So again, let's see. We're going to pick it up at verse 21. Oops. With the prisoner, Joseph in prison. We'll just start 20, whatever. Oh, 21. Keep it pressing. This new keyboard I have, I hate. I hate it. It's okay to hate non-living things. All the keys are right next to each other. There's no big spaces. So, I can't feel any keys. It's very annoying. It was an emergency replacement. Anyways, thanks for joining me in this study. If we have anything more to say, we'll say it tomorrow. Thanks for joining me. Hopefully, like I said, by the end of the week, we'll be getting back to, maybe we'll have a live stream Friday. We'll see. Until then, thanks for joining me.
Behind the doors, awesome, and the posts, hast thou set up thy remembrance, for thou hast discovered thyself to another than me, and art gone up. Thou hast enlarged thy bed and made thee a covenant with them. Thou lovest their bed where